Erica, you work with a lot of successful people. What separates those who make it from those who remain stuck? And how do you get here?
Oh my gosh. I think when you think about those who make it and those who get stuck, the biggest thing is going to be resiliency. And then I would also say the ability to look inward. I think it is so easy in today's world that we always try to find something else to be the reason why it didn't work out or the reason we didn't get a promotion or we didn't, make that sale. In We don't look at what we could do to change those things. So I think number one, you have to have the resiliency to push through all of the roadblocks because we all have roadblocks. We know those are coming. And then also just that ability to self-reflect and look inward and figure out what can I do to take control of the situation.
And how can somebody build resilience? How can I? Because again, everyone has a tolerance when it comes to adversities, right? Some people can deal with adversities better than other ones. If you're somebody who has learned their skill or even doesn't know how to work on their skill, how can somebody just build more resilience and learn how to work more inwards?
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question, Daniel. And here's the thing that I love about resiliency is most people who are really good at resiliency are there not because they wanted to be there, it's because they've had a lot of things that have come into their lives that have forced them to be resilient. So if you find yourself in this place where you really need more resilience and you haven't had that opportunity for, you know, all of those things that come your way, you can start to look for those opportunities. And you said it, like we all have a tolerance, but I love to look at it from this perspective of the zone of comfort, right? Like we all have our comfort zone. It's nice and cozy in that little spot. But if you step just outside of that comfort zone, just a little bit, do something every day that makes you slightly uncomfortable. And I like to call this take one brave bite a day. I kind of equate it to how do you eat an elephant, and that's one bite at a time. How do you become somebody who is resilient? You do a brave and courageous thing every day. And it doesn't have to be a massive monumental thing. You don't need to go asking your boss for a 50% raise every day, right? They're going to think you're crazy. But you do that one thing that takes you slightly out of your comfort zone. The magical thing about your comfort zone is it starts to expand. So every day that you do that thing that takes you out of that comfort zone, you're building that resiliency one brave bite at a time.
You know, it's very interesting what you said because I feel that from a concept point of view, it's very simple.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, for a lot of people, it's very hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
And at least from my perception, it feels like to me that when I'm trying to get out of my comfort zone, I have this tendency to go for all or nothing. Just I try to, if I don't try something big, then it's just like, am I wasting my time? It's like it's too small of a challenge, just like embarrassing for me. It's like I have to make big changes. If not, then what am I doing here? I should be able to do it. But at the end, that's what keeps us stuck. I guess I mean, us trying to do too much too quickly.
Well, I would say, like, if it depends on the person, like if that's what motivates you, Daniel, to take massive action and you were able to find momentum in that, stick with that. But a lot of what keeps people stuck is they get out of practice. Life is comfortable, it's easy, and then a challenge comes up and they don't know what to do about it. That's why I say, like, always incorporate that brave bite a day exercise into what you're doing. However, if big and massive things like that, like what you're talking about, Daniel, work for you, absolutely lean into that. Like, don't worry about taking the small bites. But I'm a big fitness buff, Daniel, so I love to equate it to fitness. If I went out there and told, like, I would never start a newbie running a marathon. I would say, let's see if we can get out there and walk a mile. But again, some people love that big challenge. And I have seen people in my fitness experience where they're like, nope, I'm going all in. I'm signing up for the marathon. And they train and they knock it out of the park. So you do need to lean into your individual tendencies.
Yeah, it's funny to me because the way that I've seen it is we have some level of delusion in our head, or at least I do, in a way that I can see myself doing something, right? And then it's like, okay, I should be able to do that. I mean, theoretically it's not that hard. And when I start doing it, it's like, shit, it's like a lot harder than I thought. And then I have this gap between where I am and where I think I should be or what I could do, and realizing like this is a massive gap. And because I didn't think it through. So in some instances, it has worked for me where I don't know what I don't know, and then just jump and then realize that, oh, I shouldn't be able to do this, and yet I did it. But in other cases, I realize I'm not equipped, and then I tend to quit quickly because I felt that I should have been further ahead in
Mm.
the learning curve. I would say, and then I realized, no, I suck at this. I might as well just do something else. And I think that happens quite often when we see ourselves being able to do something, and then when we try it, we realize, we're not as good as we thought.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do that. And I don't know if it's a they think it's going to be easier than it is, or if motivation is just really big at the time of signing up for the marathon or, taking the course or saying I'm going to start a podcast or whatever that thing is. And that's why, like, you have to put these small practices into place because motivation does not exist, as an infinite resource. Like, it comes and it goes and it ebbs and it flows, and it ebbs when things get hard, right? When we have to really put our foot down and get our hands dirty and dig in. And then we're understanding that, like, wow, I did not have as many of the skills, or I didn't know all of this about it. And it's much easier for me to stay smaller and stay in this zone of comfort. So again, back to that brave by today, like those small actions teach you to take bigger and braver steps over time. So yes, even if you are taking that big brave step and then you're like, wow, this is a lot more in depth than I thought, like it's going to be way easier just to back out. Guess what? It is going to be easier to back out in the short run. But what I tell everybody all of the time is that it does not matter how long it takes to do something if that something is lighting you up, because the time is going to pass anyways. And so a lot of people have said, like, I always wanted to go back to school. I never got a college degree, but that's 4 years. And that's if I'm full time. So if I'm part time, that's 8 years. And I'm like, yeah, but you could wake up in 4 years and not have done anything towards that goal. Or you could have taken those small steps every day. You know what I mean? They all add up.
Yeah, from a motivation standpoint, I feel like it's just like a rocket. It helps you to take off, but after that, you need to rely on other things. Call it discipline, call it willpower, call it other things that it will help you continue the momentum. But you need that first push. And when you said about timing, I think that a lot of people overestimate, including myself, what we can do in a day, but underestimate what we can do in a year or five. And then, as you said, it's like, well, a new college degree will take me like 4 years, and then 4 years pass by. It's like you didn't even realize, and you're stuck in the same place. So the time that you spend worrying and think about how long it's gonna take you, if you had invested that time doing that thing, you would have been already way further ahead than where you are right now. So having those reminders is a very, very good thing for everyone, because we see the time and then think it's forever. But then if you're trying to remember what you did 10 years ago, you remember, like, feels like yesterday. Time just goes
And
quickly.
and remember too, time is a finite resource. Like, you are not promised another 10 years, 20 years. You're not even promised another moment on this earth. So capitalize on that time. But that's also not me here to say, like, you have to make the every moment of your life count, because we all have those moments where we're on the couch doom scrolling TikTok and we just need some quiet time to ourselves, right? So figure out where that balance lies, figure out how to integrate that. But yes, if you are a busy parent out there and you are trying to juggle kids and work and life, and you have this big dream to open your business, you're not going to be able to do it overnight, right? Because you've got bills to pay, you've got mouths to feed, you've got things to do, but you can take small steps. And like Daniel, for me, when I wanted to start my own podcast, so I have a podcast called the Glass Ceiling and Sticky Floor podcast. I probably thought about that podcast for a good year before I actually did anything about it, because I had way too many limiting beliefs and negative thoughts in my head about what people would think. Would people listen? Would they care? Are people going to laugh at me? Things that don't even matter. Those things, I like to call them sticky floors, but they keep you stuck. And so what I do is I like to put something out there into the world, into the universe, that I can't take back. So, for example, when it came to starting my podcast, I sent an email out to 10 of my closest female friends who I knew would hold me accountable. And I sent the podcast out. I said, this is what I want to do. I am nervous about doing it. I need your support. And every single one of those women backed me up. And that gave me the rocket fuel when I ran out of it to start the podcast and launch it and get it out there. Same thing happened when it came to my book, which is also called Glass Ceilings and Sticky Floors. I wanted to write this book, but I had no idea about publishing. I didn't know if anybody would read it. I had no idea what it took, but I sat down and I wrote that entire manuscript. Then I started working with publishers. And then, Daniel, I found out how much work it was really going to be to get to the launch. And I was like, oh my God. Thankfully, I had already written the entire manuscript. And I felt like I can't let this sit on my hard drive for the rest of my life. Like, I don't want to get to the age of 90 and be like, wow, I have this manuscript that's just sitting on my computer. I wonder what would have been. So do those things that will add that momentum and add the rocket fuel later on when your own gusto and motivation starts to wane. It's kind of like
I
leaving
love that
yourself like a
story.
little snack on a marathon. Like, I used to have a friend that would drive around and leave Gatorade at different mile stops. It's kind of like that. You run the first 5 or 6 miles, you have a secretly hidden Gatorade in the bushes. You drink it, you got enough to go on to the next one.
Yeah, that is a very smart way of doing things, and I love your story about it, both the book and the podcast, because you mentioned something that is key to me and the reason why a lot of people remain stuck, and that's the stories we have told ourselves, the limiting beliefs we have that a lot of those came in our childhood. A lot of those came from experiences we had. Our brain created a story just to give us an explanation or just a meaning, and then we remain with those stories for 10, 20, 30, 50 years, and you don't get to where you are now, having a podcast. Just you just recently launched a book and you are very successful in your career as an entrepreneur without challenging those stories and those limiting beliefs. So how do you challenge those, not only about yourself but about the world? How do you change that
Mm.
lens?
Well, I'll start with challenging yourself first, and then let's talk about the world, because I think it's two massively, different ways to look at it. But when you're talking about yourself, number one, you have a lot more control, right? Because you're talking about your own agency. And I tell my 9-year-old son this all the time. You can only control your thoughts and your actions, and you're responsible for those. So in my book, I talk about my science-backed framework that's called the SNAP method. And it stands for stop and take note of the physical sensations in your body. Name that sticky floor, ask and answer some deep and personal questions, and then pivot your limiting belief, your thought, whatever. And I'll go into that. And the first step being stop and take note is that, as you said, a lot of these things have been ingrained in us since childhood. So we don't even recognize that we are having those thoughts or that we are already stopping ourselves before we even get started. We are preventing ourselves from raising our hand before asking a question, right? Like, we are our own worst enemies, but we don't even know it. So when you start to feel these sensations in your body that aren't like just normal good feelings, because we all have kind of this neutral state where we're just being, right? We're not at a big high. We didn't just have a huge win, and we're not feeling really down on ourselves. We're just kind of at neutral. Everybody has that. And when you start to enter that limiting belief world, your vibe lowers and you feel these different things in your body. So for example, you may have sweaty palms. You may have like anxiety that feels like an elephant is sitting on your chest. You may have nervous energy where you're tapping your foot up and down. You may sweat a lot. You may get really cold. There's a ton of different physical sensations that come with this, but your body is trying to tell you, hey, something is up, something is triggering you. Pay attention. So once you notice those physical sensations of like, wow, this is really giving me a lot of anxiety right now, then you can move to naming that sticky floor. Okay, why do I feel this anxiety? And then you start to dig into that of like, okay, I'm feeling like an imposter. Maybe you have imposter syndrome. Maybe you aren't applying for a job because you don't meet 100% of the criteria. You're dealing with perfectionism. Maybe you're worrying about what other people would think, right? I like to call that FOPO, the fear of other people's opinions. And so it's all of that. And so when you name that sticky floor, Daniel, you can start to take agency back over, right? You start to reclaim power because, as my old mentor once said, you can't unring the bell. Once you've made note and you've like said, wow, I'm really struggling with that right now, you have that agency. And that's where you move to asking and answering some really deep and pivotal questions about whatever's going on. And my favorite two questions are, is this thought helpful? And is this thought true? Because 99% of the time, those thoughts that you have are not helpful and they're not true, right? So, for example, I've already talked to you about starting my podcast. I had such an intense fear of what other people would think, that they would laugh at me, that they would say, what is she doing? She doesn't know what she's talking about, or she's not working. So, like, what is she actually doing? And the first thought was, is this thought helpful? Number one, absolutely not. What do those thoughts do for me besides keep me stuck? Nothing. And then the second thought was, is this thought true? Well, let's break it apart. It could be true. There could be people out there saying that, right? But there are also 8.3 billion people in the world. Are all 8.3 billion people going to say that? Absolutely not. So then it's kind of rationalizing with yourself. And that's when we move to the pivot, which is simply your reframe. How are you going to look at this differently? So then that's where I would take that. Yeah, there might be some people out there who do say those things, but there also might be 3 times as many people who love my message and who connect with my podcast and who find value in it. And which is more powerful for me? Those few people, those few haters, or the people whose lives I'm changing? And so when you pick that pivot and you pick that reframe, you are taking the power over your sticky floor. And here's the thing, before like we get into anything else or move on, like this is not a one and done. I've solved all the world's problems with a simple snap method and now no one suffers from imposter syndrome anymore, right? Those sticky floors will continue to bubble up in your life as you take yourself out of your comfort zone, which, Daniel, we're growth minded people. We're doing that all the time, right? And so you constantly have to stretch yourself to walk yourself through that method, and that's how you continue to grow.
Yeah, I think that you need, and your snap method just works a lot becoming self-aware, because it requires a high level of self-awareness of identifying, okay, this is my physiological response. I'm feeling that, I feel fear, I feel anxiety, I feel nauseous, I feel palm sweaty, all the things that you describe. And then it's like, okay, let me stop and let me try to get out of the emotion and trying to really get curious and see exactly why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling. And I like that because you're encouraging the person to just, okay, let me see exactly what's happening. And by the way, some of the stories might be true, but then it's like, because that might be somewhat true, but then that doesn't mean, as you said, you might have some haters. And I like what Alex Hormozzi says. It's like, okay, let's say that you do indeed have some haters, and I mean, people are not gonna like you. Some people are not gonna like you. So, are you gonna let them, people that don't care about you, stop you? Like, no. So I like that because I experienced the same thing to some extent when I launched my podcast last year. I was doing a lot of research, preparing myself to launch it this year, and every single day I had that voice saying, nobody's going to listen to you, nobody will care, who are you, what's your, you have no authority to just uh, talk about anything. And then I had to keep that voice quiet and keep pushing forward. It's like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. Now, one thing that helped me a lot was, are you familiar with Stephen Pressfield work? He's like Do the Work, or he has another one, The War of Art. He talks
Yes,
about
I am.
resistance. Yes, he talks a lot about resistance, and how resistance can be shown in so many different ways, that whenever we are about to go through that discomfort, whenever we're stepping out of our comfort zone, then we'll have voices, or we'll have, oh, you know what, I should start recording a podcast or writing a book, but I see that shelf and that needs to be fixed, so let me go and fix that. Right, so you'll find a lot of things that they're more important that your actual work, and that is tough. But when it comes to sticking floors and imposter syndrome and all of that, it talks a lot about our confidence, right?
Mm.
And let's say you the one of the reasons why you are where you are is just because you had to develop or work a lot in your confidence, because you don't get to, I mean, whether you were in corporate America, when you just reach one of the highest levels in your position, then you decided to become an entrepreneur, you don't get that by having lack of confidence. But a lot of people have this confident gap where they feel that, okay, this is where I should be, but this is where I am. How can somebody close that gap and make it easier for them to just push through that imposter syndrome?
Yeah. Confidence is a muscle, right? And it's a skill. It's not, I think we used to think that you were either a confident person or you weren't. You were either an extroverted person or you weren't. You were either a, you know, wild all out there person or you weren't. But those are all things that yes, we have tendencies towards them, but we can actually control how confident we are when we show up, right? And I hate this whole like fake it till you make it kind of thing. Like, to me, trust me, I have done that many, many times before, but it doesn't feel authentic. To me, I'm more like I love the Nike slogan of just do it, because it says like it kind of sends this message of like, yeah, it might be hard, but like just do it. Just freaking go do it. And so it's not saying fake it, pretend like you're someone that you're not. But again, I've done that and I'm not knocking it, because there are moments where that will be the thing that carries you through, but just do it. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how sloppy that first thing is. Like, and here's what I love, especially like in the entrepreneur world, is I love seeing all of these crazy successful entrepreneurs, and then they go back and they share like their second YouTube video ever. And they're like, look at where I started. And you're like, oh my God, that's the best thing I've ever seen, because that's what I look like today. And it gives you that hope. And I am such an evidence kind of person. Like, I want to understand the science, I want to know the whys. Like, don't get me wrong, I love a good manifestation and putting it out there to the universe, but you have to do the work. So, back to that Nike slogan of just do it. Most of the time, we know what we need to do, right? We know that we don't need to be go fixing that shelf that you were just telling me about, the broken shelf. We know that's been broken for 6 months. It doesn't need to be fixed today, but we'll do anything to keep ourselves in that comfort zone. We'll do anything to protect ourselves. And like you were saying, kind of taking it all the way back to the beginning of like, we were all rejected as kids at some point, right? Like by a teacher, by a popular kid on the playground. Like, we were all rejected. And so we know at what a young age what that feels like. And so we are always trying to protect ourselves. But we are not a little 6 or 7 year old girl or boy anymore, right? That doesn't have the tools to manage our emotions. We are grown adults. We can practice these things. And there are different tools that you can do to practice your confidence. And sometimes it's like getting really comfortable saying who you are and what you do, right? Like, I work with a lot of women who they don't have their elevator pitch down. And it's simple. And they're very talented, like just very qualified women, but they did not practice this articulation of like, hey, I'm Erica and I help ambitious women climb the corporate ladder without burning out, right? The very first time I tried that, I was like, I'm Erica and I like to just like help women get more confidence. What? Like, which one sounds better? And so again, sometimes it's little things like that that you can put into place that give you the confidence boosters, but you have to find what works for you, and you have to do it religiously, because if you don't, woo, it's so easy to go back.
Yeah, you said a lot of things that I could relate to, and things that I've even done. But one of the things you mentioned at the end is like a lot of these women that don't practice their elevator
Elevator
pitch,
pitch, yeah.
or even in my head, I have this weird thing that doing something, practicing for something makes me very uncomfortable. I would
Mm-hmm.
rather just, in my mind, I think once I'm in the spot, I'll be able to perform. It's like, and when I'm in the spot, I'm not able to perform because I never practice it. I never put the words, but in my mind, it's almost like telling myself, almost like fixing that shelf to avoid the uncomfortable work. It's the same thing. I'm not gonna practice because I know that I'll deliver. And that experience that you had at the beginning when you first gave your elevator pitch, and it was very like not very confident and all of that. And I think that a lot of confidence comes from, now that you mentioned, from practice. There's, I
Mhm.
mean, if you, especially if you are a public speaker, I would assume that you practice your speech for like tens of times,
Hours,
dozens of
hours,
times,
hours,
and
hours. Yeah.
hours, until it becomes almost like second nature, like muscle memory. And then you still might have some anxiety when you're about to step on the stage, but once you're stage, you know that you're practiced and it comes very natural. And I think that
Mhm.
I like that, because when you brought up the point of elevator pitch, that is so very so simple. It's like you have to like 30 seconds, maybe a minute at most. That is so something so small that people can practice and then become better. And
Yeah.
building that muscle of, as you said, the confidence, but also the muscle of start practicing things that will take them to, okay, now I feel more confident because I've put the work. I've put the work. So
I love that you brought that up, Daniel, because when I first started keynote speaking, I put off practicing every single day. Like it made me so uncomfortable. I didn't want to do it because guess what? It exposed my weaknesses. Even though it was just to me, even though I was the only one in that room, it exposed my weakness, which then made me had to confront all of those other sticky floors of imposter syndrome and the worrying about what other people will think. So it's almost like this double-edged sword where it's not only keeping you stuck, but it's keeping you from doing the things you need to do to get unstuck. And so I had to do, Daniel, is I had to break it down into the smallest of chunks. Like I had to say, like, okay, I'm only going to work on my introduction today. That's it. I'm just going to work on that. I'm going to do it X amount of times until I feel really good at it. Because in the beginning, I was trying to do the whole thing. And it was so overwhelming. And it was so just like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to get this whole thing done. But if you give yourself, number one, enough time that you can break it down into these small chunks, and then you start attacking these small chunks, all I did was I started with the introduction and then I added like pillar one, pillar two, pillar three, and I would build it and add it on there, which every day made me better at the introduction, better at pillar one, better at pillar two. And I started to build that confidence muscle of, yeah, it really does suck. And I really do suck going over the first time. Like, let's be real, we all do. We suck at the first time.
yeah.
But you keep doing it, you get better. But like, that was the perfect example because I felt that one to my bones, Daniel, because I remember just being like, I got so many days. I'll put it off a little bit longer.
Yeah. Yes, and that brings me back to the point almost at the beginning, when you see yourself doing performing at a certain level, and when you start practicing, and then it exposes all your flaws that you never see in your vision in your head, and then it's like, I don't like this, so I might as well not do it. I'll I'll deal when I'll deal with it when I have to do it, and then it's like, well, if you never practice, that's what happens. But that talks a lot about yourself, about um, the growth mindset, but also how to overcome some self-doubt. Because here's the thing: when I was reading about you again, you were working as a CSUR at a company, and then you decided to move on. You just have this intuition in you, right, that you wanted to do something different, even though you were making very good money, that a lot of people would love to have the kind of lifestyle or even position you had. But for you, there was something else. Like, i don't I don't want to keep doing this. I want to do something else. But what happens is, I feel like that for a lot of people, self-doubt can silence that intuition, right? We feel that we need to go somewhere, but then our self-doubt takes over. As somebody who not only lean into but also tap into that intuition, and I was able to become very successful on the other side, trying something completely new. How can people tap more into this superpower? Because as you said, we all sort of know what we're supposed to do. We all know what we want to do. We kind of know deep inside what we're meant to do in this earth, right? How can people tap into that when they're full of self-doubt?
I'm a big fan of reflective exercises, right? Whether that is journaling, whether that is, you know, talking with a friend and kind of getting really reflective about your life and what's been going on. I think the reflective exercises and looking into your past are a really great way to examine, like, where did those things bubble up for you so that you can start to be a bit more proactive in the future. Um, and so I think with the self doubt too, a lot of that comes down to also that confidence muscle and really finding the things to step out of your comfort zone every single day, because those are the things that will start to prove your self doubt wrong. And one of the things, Daniel, it's an exercise that I do with a lot of my clients who are struggling with confidence, is I help them. I have a what I call a heck yeah journal. And every single day, I ask them to write down something that they did that they are proud of, that they maybe thought they wouldn't have been able to do or wouldn't have gotten to it. And that could be as simple as like, hey, I asked my boss if I could leave early on Friday for my kids' school play. And like, I'm really always nervous about asking if I can do that. Or it could be something of like, yeah, I did my sales pitch and I kicked butt. So it can be really big to really small. But then when you have those moments where you feel like, wow, I don't know if I can do this, you can go back to your heck yeah journal and you can see that evidence and the proof that you have done hard things before. And one of the quotes that has always gotten me through some of the hard stuff is when it says, like, you've survived 100% of your bad days. And it's like, wow, okay, that's true. That is 100% true. No one can refute that. So if that is true, what else can I do? What else can I accomplish today?
I love that. I kind of tried to do that about what 6 8 months ago. I was trying to do something kind of new, and I was very intimidated by it. I was very, very scared. I had a lot of anxiety. I couldn't pinpoint a story of why I was feeling the way I was feeling. I didn't have that negative voice in my head. I just had the emotion. So I had to sit down and start writing things. I had to remember things that I have done in the past where I felt similarly, and and then it's okay. I have this evidence. I've done things in the past. I remember doing X, Y, and Z and feeling terrified, and then I did it anyway. So that can help a lot of people um, bring that. But that even takes me to a point when it comes to having those, once again, self doubt or belief systems or stories, and now what I'm seeing from society, and I really would love to have your point of view in this particular thing, is that we see that more and more women are becoming more successful, right? Which I think is great. Is amazing, right? It's almost like they're chasing their dreams and their passions and their ambitions, but it seems that the more successful a woman becomes, the harder it is for her to find a life partner for whatever reason. Call it societal norms, call it uh, um, whatever gender
Yeah, it's
norms,
it's it's a lot of the
anything.
gender norms and societal norms,
Yeah.
100%.
S- So, since you work with a lot of successful women and you're a
Mhm.
successful woman yourself, do you think that this will prevent in the future women from pursuing their goals and dreams in order to find a life partner?
So there's a lot to dissect here, and I have a ton of thoughts on it. But my first
Mhm.
thought would be that number one, women have always been successful. They're just demanding the same recognition and the same space and the same ability to be in those rooms as men have, right? Like when we look back at when women were actually able to take out a mortgage without a male signature, we're talking about the 1970s. Okay. That wasn't that long ago. So society is finally catching up with this whole concept of equality in the workplace. They are not yet up to equality all over in the home, with the unpaid work that women do, with the mental workload. So there is still a lot of catching up that the systems have to do in order to get there. What I also know to be true is that, and I'm saying this because I think it's very important that people might listen and they may feel a certain way automatically about being successful and being able to find a partner that can support that. But studies have shown in households where women are the primary breadwinner, so women make the bulk of the salaries, that the men will lie and say they make more, and the women will also lie and say they make less. So it does exist. That problem is out there. I've seen the studies and I've seen the data, and it makes people slightly uncomfortable, right? I mean, think about it. Like, how many men and dads do you know out there that confidently walk around and say, I'm a stay-at-home dad? Not many, not many. Definitely not in my circle, right? And that's not to say they don't exist. They do. I know of several that I've seen before, but the majority of men work. And again, that's the societal issues. So I don't think that it necessarily holds women back from being successful. I think a lot of it too is cultural. I have some friends they're from India and they're very successful women, and their parents have said to them, like, it's going to be harder the more successful you are to find a mate, because again, cultural norms, cultural standards dictate that the woman should make less than the man and should not be the head of the household. So it depends on a lot of things. But if we're going to look at a very siloed, like in general, in the US, women and men, women want to be successful. And I don't, I don't necessarily think that the majority of them are going to slow their growth trajectories for a man, especially in today's world where like a banana is $6, right? Like everybody needs to make as much money
Yeah.
as possible. But there are women who are quieter about their success because they worry that they're bragging, that it's going to turn people away. And again, you have to think about the societal norms and the gender norms. And like when a man sits there and says all of the accomplishments that he has achieved, it's taken, as wow, that's amazing. He's done such great things. But with a woman, it's bragging. So women are having to balance the societal norms and the cultural norms of like how we show up in the workplace and in the world. So I don't know that I necessarily have a full answer to that. There's a lot of nuances. And it depends on the person, but I think my main takeaway would be never dim your light for a man, and girl, you go make that money.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there was a right or wrong answer. I just wanted to get your point, especially from a successful woman who surrounds herself with a lot of other successful women. And I do feel that things need to change, and the hypergamy have to just sort of go away. A lot of women want to be with somebody at the same status levels or higher, which for thousands of years it made sense when the man was the hunter and the provider and all of that, and women were not. And now things are changing, and they have to come to realize that they can, I mean, they can have it all. They can have like like a good partner, might make less than her, but they can also work on their career, so they can also work on their things. And from a man's point of view, I know there's a lot of insecurity around it, and they try to call them masculine, and then trying to do all these kind of things, because if you take the only thing that is valuable for a man, it's like, if I'm no longer the provider, then what do I bring to the table? Yeah, you can bring a lot of intangibles, a lot of like a lot of support, a lot of other things that might work and might help you have a very healthy long-term relationship. But since those things cannot be measured, then there's a lot of insecurities around that. So I like your perspective, I like your point of view, and it was very interesting how what you said about women, both men and women lying. If the woman is the breadwinner, both of them are going to lie saying that the man is the one who's making more. So it's a very interesting point, and we'll see. I mean, it probably going to take a lot longer for a society to change, and then to trying to evolve and understand, hey, this is the new reality. And as you said, groceries are very expensive, inflation is high. It's a you need two-income household to
I
support
mean, you
yourself.
really do
So
need a dual income household to support yourself. But my main takeaway would be whether you are a man or a woman, like if you feel like you have to dim your light and your success for another partner, like number one, get yourself in some therapy because that's some BS. Like you got it, and go find someone else who's not going to be like that.
yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Erica, I've been enjoying this conversation quite a lot, and there's a lot of good insights and and points that you have given for a lot of people that remain stuck. But as a closing question, what lessons have you learned from your lowest point, and if there's anything that you are grateful for?
Oh my gosh. I think the thing I would say is the lesson from my lowest point would be to lean on the help of others, right? My zone of discomfort is asking for help. I don't like to ask for help. I want to do it all myself and it's going to be all great. And I don't want to put anybody else out. So that doesn't work long term. Don't do that. So I would say my biggest piece of advice would be to ask for help. Number one, people want to help. Think about how much you enjoy helping, Daniel, right? If I don't ask you for help, I am denying you the opportunity to serve. And so that's a mentality and a mind shift that I constantly am working on embracing because I struggle with asking for help. So asking for help, and then I'm just so grateful for so many things. I'm grateful for the rejections that have led me to where I am. I'm grateful for some of the failures. I'm grateful for some of my biggest like F ups in life, because those have all taught me some really valuable lessons and they've made me the person that I am. They have given me the confidence to be the coach, author, and speaker that I am. And without the hard things, like you don't get to experience the good things. But I'm so grateful for just the opportunity to be here on this earth of this rock that's flying through space, right? So yeah, but that was a great question. Thank you, Daniel.
I love that. I love that, especially because I felt call out because it's hard for me also to ask for help. It's so hard. And and as you said, just like it's you, when you decided to launch your podcast, you relied on other people and asked for their help. It's like, hey, I need you to hold me accountable. You could have probably done it by yourself, but also it is a lot easier if you relied on others, if you let others help you. So I totally love that. So, Erica, where can people? I know that you recently launched your book. You have a podcast. Where can people find you, or even work with you if they want to, if they need a coach?
Yes. Oh, if you need a coach, go to my website, which is just ericaandersonrooney.com, ERICA. And you can message me there. You can email me, find me on LinkedIn, DM me, say you heard me on this podcast. I love connecting with people. I am such a connector. That's what lights me up. So even if you don't need coaching, just say, hey, I heard you on this podcast and it was a super fun conversation. And, let's chat. So thank you, Daniel. Thank you for that opportunity.
And how about the for the book
Ah,
or
yes,
the
get that
podcast?
book
Yeah,
on
yeah.
Amazon. The
Okay, so
Amazon gods will deliver.
okay,
You can get a Kindle, audio book, you can get the hardback book, and anything you want all on Amazon. And just search for Glass Ceilings and Sticky Floors. My name, Erica Rooney, and it will be right there for you.
awesome, Erica. Once again, it was such a pleasure, and thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Daniel.